The flowers on the altar were still fresh when my mother-in-law slid the envelope across the table toward me. Not a condolence card, not a check for the funeral home, a legal envelope, the kind with a law firm's return address printed in that quiet, authoritative font that says this is serious and you cannot ignore it. My mother had been gone for 11 days. I remember staring at that envelope for a long moment before I looked up at her. She was sitting across from me in my own kitchen, the kitchen my husband and I had renovated 2 years ago, the one my mother had helped me pick the backsplash for, standing in the tile aisle at Home Depot for 40 minutes debating between warm gray and soft white. We picked warm gray. She said it would age better. My mother-in-law didn't say anything. She just folded her hands on the table and watched me. My husband wasn't home. He told me he was running errands. I believed him because I always believed him. Because for 8 years, believing him had been easier than the alternative. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers, filed 3 days after my mother's funeral. I set them down on the warm gray tile countertop, and I didn't cry. I think I'd run out of tears somewhere around day 4 of the grief, the kind of dry, hollow ache that sits behind your eyes and doesn't move. I just looked at her and said he couldn't tell me himself. She said, he thought this would be easier. I've thought about that sentence almost every day since. He thought this would be easier. Easier for whom, exactly? Not for me. Sitting in the house we shared, 11 days after burying my mother, being handed divorce papers by his mother like she was delivering a package he didn't want to sign for himself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what my mother built before you can understand what happened next. My mother came to the United States from South Korea in 1989 with $40, 2 suitcases, and a cousin who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Koreatown, Los Angeles. She worked at a dry cleaner for 3 years. Then she worked at a real estate office as a receptionist. She watched. She listened. She saved every dollar she didn't need to spend. By the time I was born, she had her real estate license. By the time I was in middle school, she owned 3 rental properties in the San Fernando Valley. By the time I graduated college, she had 7. She never talked about money the way some people do, as something to show off or to use as a measuring stick against other people. She talked about it the way she talked about everything practical, matter-of-factly, with a kind of quiet certainty that made you feel stupid for ever having doubted it. She'd say things like, "Real estate is not glamorous, but it will outlast you if you let it." Or, "The goal is not to be rich. The goal is to be unbothered." She wanted me to be unbothered. I met my husband at 26 at a work function for the marketing firm where I was a junior account manager. He was charming in the specific way that men who have never had to work very hard for anything are often charming. Easy smile, good at small talk, the kind of person who makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room when he's paying attention to you. I mistook that for love. A lot of women do. My mother met him twice before our engagement and said very little. That should have been a sign. My mother always had something to say. We got married when I was 28. He was 31. He was in commercial real estate on the sales side, which meant his income was inconsistent and his confidence was not. Some months were very good. Most months, I covered more than my share of our expenses. I didn't mind, at first. We were building something, I thought. Partners do that. What I didn't know for most of our marriage was that my mother was also building something, on my behalf. Quietly, methodically, the way she did everything. She never told me the details. She'd mention the properties, update me on tenants, complain occasionally about a maintenance issue. But she never sat me down and explained the full structure of what she'd arranged. I think she was waiting until the time was right. I think she thought she had more time. She was 63 when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. The doctor said we'd caught it relatively early for what it was, which was the most devastating kind of qualified optimism I'd ever heard. She started treatment immediately. She was practical about that too. During those 8 months, I watched my husband become someone I didn't recognize, or maybe I finally started recognizing who he'd always been. He was impatient with the hospital visits. He was irritated by the disruption to our schedule, the weekends I spent at my mother's house helping her with medication and meals, the way my attention had necessarily divided itself. He started coming home late. He stopped asking how she was doing. Then, 4 months before she died, I found the texts. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was using his phone to look up a restaurant reservation because mine was charging, and the messages were right there on the screen, not even hidden in a folder, just there. A woman named Becky, the kind of texts that don't leave room for interpretation. I confronted him that night. He didn't deny it. He said he'd been lonely. He said our marriage had been struggling for a long time. He said that maybe this was telling us something. He said all of this while my mother was in a hospital bed 40 minutes away, losing weight fast enough that her wedding ring had started slipping off her finger. I told him I couldn't deal with this right now. He said that was always my answer. I said, my mother is dying, and he looked at me like, that was an inconvenience I was using strategically. I didn't leave. I know how that sounds. But I was functioning on a kind of autopilot that grief installs in you when the grief is already overwhelming and you cannot take on one more catastrophic thing. I kept going to work. I kept visiting my mother. I kept sleeping on my side of the bed. My mother noticed something was wrong. She had a way of reading me that no one else has ever had. She didn't push. She just said, one afternoon in February, when we were sitting in her backyard with tea, I want to talk to you about some things I've set up. When you're ready. I said I was ready. She told me about the trust. She'd established it 4 years earlier through an estate planning attorney downtown named Mr. Ellison, who she had worked with for 2 decades. The trust held all 7 of her rental properties. It had very specific terms. Everything was structured to pass to me as the sole beneficiary in a way that was protected from any claim by a spouse. The attorney had advised her on this specifically, and she had been thorough. The rental income, approximately $19,000 a month across the properties, would be mine. The properties themselves were managed by a property management company she'd already contracted, so I wouldn't have to handle day-to-day operations. She also had a life insurance policy. She had retirement accounts. She had a savings account I didn't know existed. She'd been preparing for me to be unbothered for a very long time. I started crying before she finished talking. She handed me a tissue and said, "Stop, you're going to make me cry, and I don't want to do that today." She made me write down Mr. Ellison's number. She made me promise I would call him within 30 days of her passing. She said, "Don't wait. People wait and then things get complicated. You call him first." I said I would. She said, "I know you will." She died on a Tuesday morning in April, with me and my aunt beside her. The light in her room was the pale yellow kind that comes through hospital blinds in the early morning, and she was very peaceful at the end, which is the only comfort I've been able to hold on to reliably. I called Mr. Ellison on the 9th day. He was kind on the phone, careful. He said he was very sorry. He said my mother had left very clear instructions and that when I was ready he would walk me through everything. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. My husband didn't ask where I was going that morning. The meeting with Mr. Ellison lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time I walked out of that office building, I understood exactly what I had, exactly how it was protected, and exactly what I needed to do next. Mr. Ellison had even recommended a divorce attorney, unprompted, because he said my mother had specifically asked him to have a referral ready. She'd thought of everything. I sat in my car in the parking structure for about 15 minutes. Then I drove home. 2 days later, my mother-in-law was at my kitchen table with that envelope. I looked at the divorce papers for a long time. My mother-in-law was watching me with the expression of someone who has rehearsed this scene and is waiting for it to go the way she imagined. I think she expected me to fall apart, or to argue, or to beg. I picked up a pen from the drawer, the same drawer where we kept takeout menus, a spare phone charger, a little flashlight, and I signed where the tabs indicated. She blinked. That wasn't what she prepared for. I slid the papers back to her and said, "He can have his lawyer contact mine. Her name is on that sticky note." I'd already retained the attorney Mr. Ellison recommended. I'd done it the day before. My mother-in-law said, "You're not going to fight this." I said, "No." She said, "He wants the house." We had bought the house together 5 years ago, a 4-bedroom in Pasadena, with a yard and a garage conversion I'd used as a home office. My name was on the mortgage. My income had covered most of it. I said, "Then he can work that out with my attorney." She gathered the papers. She looked like she wanted to say something else and thought better of it. I walked her to the door. I closed it behind her and stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the framed photo on the wall. My mother and me at my college graduation. Both of us squinting into the sun, both of us laughing at something just outside the frame. I said to her out loud to no one, "Okay, Mom, I'm ready." What happened in the weeks after that is, in some ways, exactly what you'd expect from a divorce. Paperwork, attorneys, the tedious logistics of untangling a shared life. The house was contentious, as I'd known it would be. My husband had apparently told his attorney that he expected a significant settlement given the length of the marriage and the assets he assumed I was bringing into it. He assumed I was bringing inheritance into it. He was not wrong that I was inheriting significantly. He was wrong about what that meant for him. In California, inherited assets are separate property. This is not a secret. It is, in fact, quite clearly established. My attorney explained it at our first meeting without any drama. The way you'd explain that water is wet. What my mother left me was mine. It had been structured specifically to ensure that nothing had commingled with marital assets. Mr. Ellison and my mother had been meticulous about this. The trust predated the marriage. The accounts were separate. Nothing had ever been deposited into a joint account. Not a single dollar. My husband's attorney pushed hard for a couple of weeks. Then they ran out of road. The rental income was mine. The properties were mine. The house in Pasadena. He was entitled to a portion of the equity based on the years of marriage, which we settled on through negotiation and which he used to pay off his own debts, which I only found out about during discovery and which explained quite a lot about why some months had been so tight. He didn't get what he thought he was going to get, not even close. I know the exact moment it landed for him because his attorney sent a letter that was notably more subdued in tone than the ones before it. My attorney showed it to me with a raised eyebrow and said, "I think they just ran the numbers." I stayed in the Pasadena house for 4 months after the divorce was finalized. Then I sold it, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to live in it anymore. Every room had the texture of someone I used to be, someone who believed that being a good partner was enough, that love was sufficient protection, that a person who made you feel seen in the beginning would continue to choose to see you. I bought a smaller place in Altadena, near the mountains. A craftsman bungalow with a garden that my mother would have loved. I've planted tomatoes in the backyard. I'm not particularly good at it, but I'm learning. The rental properties generate enough income that I work because I want to, not because I have to. I've thought about that sentence a lot. My mother's version of it was the goal is to be unbothered. I understand it differently now. It's not about not feeling things. I still feel everything. I cried in a Home Depot 6 months ago because I saw a display of tile samples and thought of warm gray and soft white, and my mother standing in that aisle with her reading glasses pushed up on her head. It's about not being controlled by what other people decide to do to you. My mother understood that. She spent her whole life understanding it, and then she handed that understanding to me, carefully wrapped in the form of an estate plan and the name of a good attorney and a phone number I promised to call. My husband is with a woman named Becky. I know this because mutual friends have mentioned it, not because I've looked. I don't wish them anything specific. I just don't think about her very often, which is, I've come to realize, the best outcome I could have hoped for. My aunt called me last month on what would have been my mother's 65th birthday. She said, "Your mother knew. She always knew." I didn't ask what she meant specifically because I understood. My mother had known my husband wasn't right. She had known the marriage was uncertain. She had known that the most important thing she could do was not warn me away from a mistake, because she'd raised me to make my own choices and learn from them, but to make sure that when I landed, there was ground under me. There is. I keep her photo on the wall in the new house too. Same one. The two of us at graduation, both of us laughing at something no one else could see. Some mornings I walk past it on the way to the kitchen and I touch the frame just briefly, the way you touch someone's arm to let them know you're still there. I think she knew I'd be okay. I think that's why she could let go. I'm okay, Mom, better than okay. You made sure of that. There's a tile sample sitting on my kitchen windowsill, warm gray. I kept it after I sold the Pasadena house. I'm not entirely sure why. It's not decorative. It's just a small square of ceramic that doesn't match anything in the new place. But I know why, if I'm honest with myself. It's the last physical object that connects me to an afternoon in a Home Depot aisle, standing next to my mother while she pushed her reading glasses up onto her head and said, "This one will age better." She was right. She was right about most things, and I spent a good portion of my adult life not fully understanding that until I needed it to be true. What I've come to believe, living on the other side of all of it, is that the choices people make eventually show you exactly who they are, not who they told you they were, not who you hoped they'd become. My husband made choices for years before I saw them clearly. He chose comfort over honesty. He chose to send his mother to do something he didn't have the character to do himself. And in doing so, he showed me everything I needed to know about why the marriage had never quite felt solid, no matter how much I tried to build on it. My mother made choices too. Every year, quietly, she chose to think ahead. She chose to understand things: property law, estate planning, the specific language in a trust document. Not because she enjoyed paperwork, but because she understood that knowledge is the only protection that doesn't depend on anyone else's goodwill. She didn't wait for someone to tell her the rules. She learned them. She worked with people who knew more than she did, and she asked questions until she understood. That kind of careful, patient intelligence is not glamorous. It doesn't make for exciting dinner conversation. But it is the thing that determines, when things fall apart, whether you land on something solid or on nothing at all. I think about the version of me who might have received those divorce papers without Mr. Ellison's number already written on a notepad in my purse. That version of me would have been devastated in a different, more permanent way. Not just grieving, but genuinely lost, financially exposed, legally unprepared, dependent on a fairness that was never going to show up. My mother knew that version of me could exist, and she refused to allow it. She didn't protect me by sheltering me. She protected me by making sure I would be capable of standing. That's the thing I find myself sitting with most, in the quiet of the new house, in the garden where the tomatoes are finally coming in properly this year. It wasn't the money that saved me. It was that someone had left me with enough discipline and foresight to make sure the money was there and structured correctly and legally mine before she ever left. That kind of love requires a person to do hard things, to sit with an attorney instead of resting, to plan for outcomes she didn't want to imagine, to stay clear-headed about the world even while her own body was failing her. I want to be that kind of person. I'm working on it. Some days I'm better at it than others, but I keep the tile sample on the windowsill, and I keep showing up, and I think that's what she would have wanted most. Not for me to be sad about what I lost, but to be steady about what I still have left to build.